Hello, it's John Heaton, and today I'm joined by my longtime Beatle mate, Andrew Brooks, who's in Essex, England, and we're going to be discussing the Beatles breakup today and what the reasons why we think they went their separate ways all those years ago, and should be a lot of fun.
I think so. Thanks, John.
Okay, Andrew, so what do you reckon? How far back do we have to go to trace the origins of the split? Some people say Brian Epstein's death. I personally think that's a bridge too far, to quote one of my favorite movies. But I guess one could make a case for them becoming a little bit rudderless after Brian's death, but I think they were distancing themselves from him anyway,
Yeah.
post.
I think that's probably, for me, I think that's the correct starting point, is the death of Brian, I think, because after that it's what we're going to do now. Paul tries to take charge with Magical Mystery Tour. You know, they followed George out to Bangor in Wales to see the Maharishi. They've gone out to see that. Then that's when obviously Brian's death has occurred. And Paul's like, well, okay, someone needs to take control, and from what I can see from the stuff from Magical Mystery Tour, it's him. And whether that's caused a bit of resentment amongst the group, I don't know. But I think that's like the pinnacle, the start of it all, the big bang, so to speak.
Yeah, but regarding Mystery Tour, I think even George has gone on record saying at least it kept us busy doing something and it kept us together. And, it's better than just sitting at home in the garden, like Ringo said, for 6 months doing nothing. Maybe it came a little bit too quickly after Pepper, I don't know. But there's nothing wrong with the concept. Obviously, it should have been shown in colour. But I don't think there was any serious breach within the group in '67. I think the first seeds of it was sown in '68, in my opinion.
Oh, what, White Album stuff, or pre that?
Yeah, I was going to say combination of Yoko coming in, encouraging John to be more forthright in his opinions. He'd taken a little bit of a backseat in '67, maybe something to do with how many acid tablets he was swallowing. But I think he did have a resurgence in his self-confidence in '68. So I think that led to friction, such as insisting a track from Revolution 9 went to.
Yeah. So you think that Yoko, although not entirely to blame, I think we're both agreed on she's not entirely to blame for the split, and I don't think anyone is in it entirely to blame. There's no one person that you could really blame. I think it's things coming in from all angles. That's how I see it, and and unfortunately, I think the inevitable happened.
Yeah, and they were becoming more independent, and there's nothing wrong with that. John and Yoko were going their way, and Paul and Linda would go theirs, and they would each enjoy successful solo careers. And I think if we were to put it in a nutshell, the reason why they split was a perfectly natural one, in terms of there literally wasn't room on one album for three such talented songwriters plus Ringo, unless they made a double album every time.
I mean, the Lewisham tape is interesting to hear them discussing post Abbey Road, the next album, actually, wanting to give George more of the share, and Ringo, if he wanted a second track, to give him a second track, as opposed to just his one, but to give an equal share to George. And I think that shows that they were evolving and they were looking ahead as to what is to come. But unfortunately, things occurred, and they all went their own ways.
Yeah, I was watching a video on Pop Goes the 60s with Matt Williamson the other day, where he's discussing the fact that during that September discussion, or in the months after, George didn't seem to be particularly keen on this equal time proposal, when you would have thought he would be delighted, because there's an interview with him in, I think, March 1970, where he's saying it was getting a bit silly. We were saying, 3 Paul tracks, 3 George tracks, 3 John. and 2 Ringo, and he was kind of dismissing it as a stupid idea. But actually, that would have been the only way they could have possibly played together.
I mean, it could be that he's now thinking, well, I've got all this backlog of stuff. I don't want to be giving it to this lot, you know. And he might have been thinking, well, I'll still be in the band, but I might want to do my own stuff, and I'm a bit reluctant in giving them the decent songs.
Yeah, but potentially knowing how money-minded George is, he would have been well aware that something in Here Comes the Sun going out under the Beatles name would make him a shed load more royalties than if he were to put out a solo record. Great as those songs are, I think the fact that under the Beatles umbrella, he probably to this day, his estate earns more money from those songs than any of his solo songs, I would say. I'm guessing, but
I mean, the fact that he has to share the royalties, though, surely, because obviously with something in Here Comes the Sun, it's under the name the Beatles, so he has to give 3/4 of the recording royalties away, whereas if it's released under George Harrison, he gets 100% of that.
Well, I thought, doesn't it work that the songwriter gets the majority of the royalties anyway? So I don't think there's too much performance. Like Ringo didn't get too much royalties from Beatles records. I think he said in one of his interviews that the main money is in the songwriting.
Well, so I'm sure someone who's watching will know more than us, and if you do know, drop us a comment, and we'll read and respond, won't we, John?
Yeah. While we're on George, this whole myth about the John and Paul rejected All Things Must Pass during the Let It Be sessions, and that was another possible cause for the disenchantment of George Harrison. But again, Matt Williamson covers that in a video specifically on that topic, and he goes through the conversations, and they're being very supportive, and they're saying, do it on an acoustic, do it on your own as a kind of hors d'oeuvre to the main show, because George is convinced that he needs an electric guitar because he thinks they're going to have to do it in a concert. But there would be nothing wrong with him with the Beatles doing a completely acoustic version on the 31st of January, just like they did for Let It Be and Long and Winding Road.
Yeah,
but George was very, very reluctant to push that song. So it was a great video from Matt, because he makes a pretty strong case for the fact that it was George being lacking in confidence in that song for some odd reason. And John,
I mean, the thing is, it does make you wonder, is the fact that he's now not in a band anymore, and he's like, well, I'm going to have to put this stuff out. Whereas before he was like, as you say, lacking confidence. So maybe he wasn't taking All Things Must Pass seriously to the band. He's just sort of like, oh, well, I've written another song if you want to play it. But once he's left that little bubble, he's on his own, and he's like, well, I better finish this track and this album. And All Things Must Pass eventually pops out with all these goodies that potentially could have been Beatles songs.
And but that title track is such a majestic number. I don't think it would have taken much effort on the part of the group, because even John Lennon suggests they spend an afternoon doing backing vocals, a whole afternoon. And this is the man who allegedly didn't want to play on any George Harrison songs. So I don't think if they'd spent an afternoon or a day on that song, they could have made a great version of it. As it is, the versions we have, although some people defend it and say it's great, I think are a bit shabby. And the version on Anthology is just a solo demo, isn't it?
Yeah. So the fact that they've brought all these songs individually, I mean, obviously, clearly John doesn't want to play on Teddy Boy, and he's doing his best in the recordings that we hear to not take it seriously. And I'm sure there must be songs that John brought to the party that the others didn't really want to play on. I don't know if you can think of any off the top of your head, but so that potentially is the beginning of the end if it didn't start where we originally said it started, sort of Magical Mystery Tour time.
Yeah, I mean, I think with hindsight, one can obviously point to Let It Be as contributing towards the unhappiness, although Peter Jackson is obviously going to show a completely new picture of them being and laughing and joking.
And I can't wait. I love it.
He's listened to all the tapes and they didn't argue once. Maybe the tapes didn't pick up the argument between George and John in the canteen on the 10th of January for a start.
I just want all of it. I don't want it chopped up. I want all 56 hours of it, you know.
Yeah, I want the overall Peter Jackson version to be balanced. I don't want it to be all hunky-dory, and I don't want it to be all miserable, and I certainly don't want to have too much of Yoko jamming with the Beatles, because it's a Beatles film at the end of the day, and I do want to see the happy bits, but I don't want it to be a rose-tinted pic.
I think what you're going to have to do is watch the original movie, Let It Be, and then watch the new one, Get Back, and then sort of pitch it somewhere in the middle, taking both sides with pinches of salt and thinking, yes, you can see they're downright miserable in Twickenham and playing, you know, in a massive warehouse, but also you can see that they are having fun. So it can't have been all that bad. I think you're just going to have to pitch it somewhere in the middle, because you know it's going to be a Peter Jackson's version is going to be all happy, hunky-dory. So, you know, and Lindsay Hogg's version, we've already seen it. So,
and maybe it's the case that there was more footage taken at Apple than at Twickenham. There's certainly more in the Let It Be film, isn't there? The Twickenham bit is kind of over after about 15 minutes. So, yeah. And I think they were a lot happier at Apple than they were at Twickenham. You can see it's a huge blooming room they're in with these coloured lights and stuff. At 8 in the morning, or 10 or whatever it was, or whatever John's.
We've been in there. I don't know if you remember. Was you not with us when McCartney did the Japanese? No, it wasn't a Japanese. It was some TV show, and it was in the Twickenham studio. It was in Twickenham, and it was actually in the studio.
I don't think I was with.
Oh, maybe it wasn't. I've definitely been in there. I've seen McCartney there, but I thought you was with me, John.
Oh, well, it's possible. I was with you for quite a few stalking activities.
Anyway, back to Let It Be.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, having gone through that Let It Be so-called misery, it's pretty ironic that they came back with Abbey Road, and which was such a harmonious project by all accounts.
It's fantastic. I mean, what a way to regroup. And did it take a Brian-style character in George Martin to say, well, I'm not going to do it unless you play nice, you know? And I just wonder if he sort of took on a little bit of a mentor role.
Yeah, I think it probably made a difference, because in the Let It Be session, you do notice that there's no producer, not even Glenn Johns, is trying to direct proceedings. That the Beatles are trying to work out arrangements for themselves, and that was the case with the All Things Must Pass, where if George Martin had been there, he would have said, maybe, George, try it on acoustic, and by the way, I'm gonna write a score for you, and it would turn out brilliantly.
Yeah, like Phil Spector and his wall of sound being brought in.
I think he produced that title track stupendously, Phil Spector. So I know Dave Costello says it's too muddy and the new version is better, but I think there's a real majesty about the production on that track.
But I think it's similar to Double Fantasy and Stripped, you know, Double Fantasy Stripped Down. That they're not, you can't really compare them. They run side by side. So the new version of Let It Be and the new version of All Things Must Pass and the original version, they'll just run side by side, and you'll pick and choose on whatever day I fancy the original. You know, I want to hear it a little bit muddy, and then whatever the new version when it comes out, I just want to hear George in his acoustic guitar with no overdubs. You know, it'll be on whatever terms you want to hear it on.
Yeah, and I know you're a big defender of Let It Be Naked, and you say it side by side, and you know, I agree with you with the stripped version of Double Fantasy. It's mostly brilliant, but I think after the first 6 months of Naked, most of, and you know, if one has to reach for Let It Be these days, it's 90% sure that I'm going to reach for the I dig a pygmy with Charles Poultry and the Deaf Aids. Rather than the complete.
That is the thing that Naked is missing, is the little bits in between. But I'm guessing the idea was just to present the songs rather than remake the original album. But I do actually listen to Naked more than the original, I have to say.
Oh God, you had to be the odd man out here. I mean, I even think, I know people said it was mischievous for Spector to say that was Hark the Herald Angels Come, and now sorry, what did he say? That was Can You Dig It by Georgie Wood. Now we'd like to do Hark the Angels Come, and then it goes into Let It Be. I think that's a piece of genius.
Yes.
I think it's hilarious. I don't know. Maybe it's a dig at Paul, I don't know, but you have to be extremely sensitive to be thinking it's a dig at Paul. Because Let It Be does sound like a hymn at the end of the day. So what's wrong?
Well, no, and as
it
I
does
said,
have,
there's not a problem
Linda
with
singing
it.
heavenly harmonies. No. But then to follow Let It Be with Maggie May, but the song about a prostitute, that was also quite mischievous. No, that was funny. There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
Everyone slags off Maggie May and Dig It. They're just pieces of fun, and they're only 30 seconds long. They're not worth getting offended over.
No, and I'm sure in all those hours of tapes, there must be more little 30-second song snippets that, when we eventually do get to hear them, we'll think, oh, that's really funny. They should have put that at the start of, I Me Mine or whatever. There'll be more of those little chunks of those little nuggets. So are we now putting Phil Spector in with the mix of list of villains for the breakup?
Events which led up to the April the 10th, 1970, with Spector putting the choir on Long and Winding Road, allegedly without Paul's permission, even though he says that he was sent a copy of the album and he okayed it, and then changed his mind a couple of days later, by which time it was too late. But, you had three Beatles wanting Phil and Paul didn't. But then what are you going to do? The tape's going to sit there forever? The Glyn Johns mix, even though I've only got a bootleg, was not worthy of release. It was rejected twice. So I think he did a good job, but I shouldn't think it helped. I probably didn't help relations with Paul, the fact that he did that treatment on Long and Winding Road, even though I think it's superb.
And Paul does the similar treatment every single time he plays it live now. There's always Wicks playing strings behind him and some sort of orchestra choir sort of thing every time. So if he was that offended to it, why hasn't he gone back to the original, this is how it should have been?
Because it's not as good. So let's go back to Abbey Road. Why do you think they were having such a harmonious time? Well, maybe it's because Let It Be wasn't as miserable as we all thought, and therefore it's nothing new. But it just does seem as if they were gelling particularly well on Abbey Road, vocally, instrumentally, taking in turns to do the solo on the end,
which is a fabulous ending.
The drum solo before that, just stunning. And at the time, I know with hindsight, everyone, like George Harrison, said, "Oh, it was obviously going to be our last album, and we'd had enough." Well, at the time, that's not what they were saying in interviews. The David Wigg tapes are very clear that they're very impressed with the album they've just made. They may not be able to say exactly how good or bad it is, but they're saying nice things about each other's songs. George,
there's that John interview where he's doing like a track by track breakdown of the album, and I don't think he says a bad word, not even about some of the Paul songs that he's slagged off later.
He bites his lip when he's discussing Maxwell. I think the most negative he gets is by saying, I think he drove John and Ringo to distraction by making them do it 100 times or something like that.
But was it because Mal couldn't hit the anvil in time, maybe?
Well, if you watch the Let It Be film, he's the worst timekeeper in the world. I think by the Abbey Road sessions, that I think Paul had sensibly said, Ringo, you better do this anvil.
Get a blacksmith in. So we're drawing up a list of villains then. So possibly Brian, because he died, unfortunately. Yoko, Phil Spector.
Clive, the obvious one is, yeah. I think the business differences really did drive a wedge between them, and John was particularly not fond of Lee Eastman and John Eastman. And
well, I was going to suggest maybe Linda as well, for bringing in her dad and brother.
Yeah, well, you know, if someone insults your father-in-law, you're not going to take too kindly to it, are you?
No.
So, and he didn't just insult him. He was openly. God, I mean, it got worse after the split. Like in '71, he was really laying into John Eastman and Lee Eastman. But at the time, he for some strange reason, he decided to go with this street kid from New York on the basis that he knew all of his songs and he could explain the relationships between the four Beatles. Okay, whoopee. I could do that.
Yeah. Could you produce an album?
I'd make a good business manager for them. I mean,
yeah.
The guy was a crook. Mick Jagger knew he was a crook.
Yeah.
And actually warned, he kind of hedged his bets, Mick Jagger, and said something like, oh, he's all right if you like that kind of thing. No, that's not a very strong warning, is it? He should have said, John, stay clear.
Yeah. You think the Russells got it right with their Ron Decline character then?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, Ron Decline. I mean, the sequence where he's looking in the mirror for 10 seconds. Oh, it's just superb, yeah. Legendary. A legend in his own lunchtime.
Yeah. So we're getting a list of villains together. Are we going to be able to poke our finger at one in particular? I know you've probably got some more written down there.
Got some more written down. I think I want to just say musical differences, even though John and Paul had more or less always had different tastes in music, and Paul tended to like, should we say, I don't know how to say this, the slightly more sentimental music. Is that fair?
Granny music?
I mean, if you look on the early Beatles albums, it's not as if you can identify a McCartney song as being granny music. The first one you could level that accusation at would be When I'm 64, maybe, on Pepper.
You don't even think I'll Follow the Sun?
No, I just think that's a beautiful ballad.
Yeah.
There's nothing granny about it. I mean,
and Mr. Moonlight?
Well, Paul didn't write that, did he?
No, I'm not saying he wrote it, but he sung it, and obviously that's his choice, his style of music that he was obviously enjoying.
But he didn't sing it. John sang it.
Oh, my apologies. You're right. I accept that. But and things like Besame Mucho as well. Now, all the early stuff that they were performing.
Highlight of the Let It Be movie, come to think of it, isn't it? That when he's singing Besame in Apple Studios, brilliant.
Better than the Decca.
Yeah, the Decca one is too fast. I think they slow it down in the Let It Be.
Yeah.
So, yeah, back to this granny music thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, even if you take Abbey Road, I mean, a track like Oh Darling, John was a big fan of. So, and I think through Gritted Teeth, he would have admitted that the medley had some strong material on it, even though he would try and say that You Never Give Me Your Money was just 3 songs joined together. Well, so was Happiness Is a Warm Gun.
Mm.
You know, that didn't make it a bad song, did it?
No. And obviously McCartney's gone on to make 3 songs into a song as well. So, you know, it's Band on the Run, for just as an example.
Yeah. I do find it interesting during that September 69 recording when John is saying, do we have to do stuff like Obla D or Maxwell, when even the guy who wrote it didn't particularly dig it? And the closest we need that kind of song is for a single. I thought that was quite an astute observation. And we give those kind of songs to Mary or whoever needs a song. Mark Lewison's right in that he says those words not angrily. He's not shouting.
No.
He's being completely level-headed and nice about it. And I just can't wait to hear the rest of that tape.
Well, I mean,
I don't know why I'm sitting on it.
You touched on Mary there. Do you think Apple, the organisation, also had an impact on the band to make them split? Having to look after all those other artists, having to look after the money side of it now.
Not really. I mean, I think, that if we look at that period when they had all those other artists to look after, as you said, they were very productive. I mean, a double album in '68, 2 singles and 2 albums made in '69. That's not bad going, is it?
No, I watched that. What's that? What's the DVD called? Something Fruit. Is it Bad Fruit? And it's all about Apple. And I forget what it's called, but there's a bit in there where someone who worked for the company, it might have even been Tony Bramwell, I'm not sure, but someone who worked there, and no, I'll tell you who it was one of the Badfinger guys, and he basically said, we had zero assistance from anyone. We were trying to put this album together, and in the end George said, oh, well, I'll come along and do it, and then he came along and helped them. He said, and basically the guy saying, we're there signed to Apple, but we're not getting any help from the 4 people who started it.
Well, I mean, George Harrison was on everyone's session, wasn't he?
Yeah. I think George actually probably enjoyed it more than anyone else, to be honest. Having all those different musicians to play with, and
I think, well, Paul helped Mary Hopkin and helped Badfinger. Maybe John didn't help too many people, but that's because, by his own admission, he wasn't a particularly fluent guitar player. Couldn't just go on someone's session and.
No, Elephant's Memory, I think, is probably the only one that springs to mind for John.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he did play on that album, didn't he? So I think you were asking if we could prioritize some of these devils that we've identified.
Well, narrow it down a bit.
Big one which we haven't mentioned, well, we touched on it at the beginning, is the completely natural reason for breaking up. No particular reason other than they just outgrew each other. They'd spent 10 years together, maybe 8 years recording, but more than 10 years as a threesome, and then Ringo joined later.
Yeah.
And they come full circle, as John said when he looked at the Blue Album picture and compared it to '63. I think and he told Paul, it's not, we've come full circle. It's really nice. And
yeah.
And as he said in the David Wigg '71 interview, I think that single interview is the best. If anyone asks me to explain the split, I just play them that October '71 interview with David Wigg in New York.
Yeah.
By the time the Beatles were at their peak, we were cutting each other down to size. We were limiting our ability to write and perform by having to fit it into some kind of format, and that's what caused trouble.
Yeah.
And it's only a rock group. It's split up. It's nothing important.
You've got all the albums. You've got.
People need the Beatles that bad. They can make a track. One of me, one of Paul, one of George, one of Ringo. The only difference is we make an album each, and it's true.
Yeah, and the output is far greater than anything that they were delivering. I mean, Abbey, as you said, Abbey Road was fantastic, but if they'd have carried on, would we have had such a fabulous output of McCartney, All Things Must Pass, Lennon, Plastic Ono Band, Boku's of Blues? I doubt if we'd have got any of that.
Yeah, I was thinking, if I was a Beatles fan, Christmas 1970, I would struggle to be disappointed that the Beatles had ended, because you would have just got All Things Must Pass, Plastic Ono Band within albums which could never have been made within the framework of the Beatles, plus the albums earlier in the year from Paul and Ringo.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the only thing one regrets as a fan for me is the manner in which they split. You know, was a little bit nasty, and they could have avoided all those lawyers and just.
But it was, I think, as Paul said, it was the only way out of it. He had to sue them. It was the only way to get out of it all.
It would have been easy, but I think all wished that it hadn't been like that. You know, it's just the way it was, and maybe it was inevitable because you know they had to get rid of Klein, and in order to get rid of Klein, Paul had to sue the other three. So, but not a nice period that first couple of years after the split, with them slagging each other off in the press, and
it lasted for quite a while, quite a number of years. You know, a couple, 2 or 3 years. I mean, obviously, we know John and Paul met again in '74.
Well, we actually had dinner together just before New Year in '71, when John was living in Bank Street.
Right.
So I think that was the first non-hostile meeting, and I think during that meeting they agreed to not slag each other off in public anymore, and also probably discussed Ireland, because within a couple of months Paul had released "Give Ireland Back to the Irish." John was recording "Sunday Bloody Sunday."
Yeah. So there we are. Well, I think we've drawn up quite a list. Have you got any more to add to it?
No, the only one which I remember Paul saying is the biggest reason I'm not with the Beatles is because I have a better time with my family. It was just getting to that stage where, you know, when a group's been together too long, they start bickering, and then they take it out on each other. You know, as John said in that interview, you got the tambourine wrong. It's your fault that my life is such a misery. And so, you know, he probably just wanted to be with Linda and just go off to Scotland and dead.
Go off to Scotland and be unemployed.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking about it before we started, and I'm thinking, as we've already said, there's no one person that you can point that finger at, and I think at the end of it all, there's actually 4 people you can point the finger at, and that's the Beatles, because they're the only ones that could break it up. Yeah, there was outside influences, but at the end of the day, it's only them that's going to go, well, I don't want to work with you anymore.
And actually, if I'm perfectly honest, if John and Paul hadn't decided to leave, I don't think George and Ringo would have. To be honest, I don't think they would have rocked the boat.
No,
I think it took John to make the move, because I don't think Paul would have done, you know, initially, and he didn't until 6 months after John had left secretly, right?
Yeah.
He waited 6 months hoping it was just one of, you know, John in one of his moods or whatever, and then realized
he wanted the divorce.
Yeah.
And Paul couldn't accept it.
But then, you know, even in the months after, when Lennon's interviewed, he's not being totally straight with the interviewer, and he's still keeping the possibility of future Beatles stuff alive. Maybe because he wasn't sure in his own head, you know.
Yeah.
Very emotional, as Anthony Fawcett said in his book.
Yes. Yeah. Obviously, the drugs have taken the toll on all of them, I should imagine, by that point. And as I said, I think you can point 4 fingers, and it's the only people who could break the Beatles up were the Beatles. It wasn't anyone else in particular. Everyone could influence them, but yeah, it was down to them at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I'm actually glad they didn't reform, you know. And a lot of people saying they would have reformed if John hadn't died. Well, I don't believe that particularly.
If they had, would it have been a concert or a recording? Because John always said everyone expecting this big concert, but I actually see it in the studio.
Anything, it would have been an album, but I mean, they couldn't even get in the same room together to have a cup of tea. There's not one picture of them. There's not one meeting where all 4 of them together after the split.
No. That photo session at 1669 at Tittenhurst Park, and that's it, isn't it? That great classic footage of them in the fields.
Even though in Chris O'Dell's book, she claims that she threw a party in, I think it was February 1970, and she claims that all 4 Beatles were there. But I don't think that's. I'm pretty sure she's not remembering that correctly.
Where's the photos? That's what I want.
Yeah, because Paul was not even around. He was up in Scotland the whole time, wasn't he? I mean,
Yeah.
he did come down to Morgan Studios and record bits of McCartney, it's true, but he was pretty much the invisible man for a while there, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I shouldn't think going on. He wouldn't have wanted to go to a party with John and George and Ringo.
No. So I'm guessing you're thinking then Free as a Bird and Real Love shouldn't have happened.
Well, I don't have a problem with them happening. It's only 2 tracks in, what was it, 25 years at the time. I thought that was pretty okay. I didn't think that was taking the piss or anything like that.
Well, I'll tell you what blew my mind last year was from the last recording from the Beatles to Free as a Bird was 25 years. And last year was 25 years from Free as a Bird to then. And that's incredible. That time from Free as a Bird to then is just flown by, but it just seems like an enormous gulf from Let It Be to Free as a Bird.
Yeah. Yeah, which brings us to the question, what will be remembered in 100 years from now? And none of us are going to be alive to know that. So
No. But our videos will be, John. We'll still be on YouTube if it still exists.
Yeah, these experts who specialised in this.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I think I personally, it was the 4 of them. I'm guessing you think similar lines there, and yeah, to point the finger at Yoko and Linda and is wrong anyway. Yeah. But,
you know, Jeffrey, one of the things Jeffrey Gilliano said on his podcast with Sam Wiles the other day, the Paul thing, he said, "Oh, it's people saying if the Beatles hadn't split, we wouldn't have got Imagine." And then he's countering that argument by saying, "But if they hadn't split, how many more Beatles albums would we have got?" Which is completely ridiculous, saying, "Oh, okay, Yoko can take the credit for Imagine, but she literally prevented the Beatles from making a dozen more albums." It's just priceless, the garbage he comes out with.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we've got the Paul and John working at Venus and Mars sort of time, and then obviously Yoko has sort of dragged John away from that, is how the story goes, if we can believe it.
I think John was particularly keen to do it in the first place, because if you read the Lennon letters, you know, that one edited by Hunter Davis, he's writing to Derek Taylor saying, "Oh, Linda's trying to get me and Paul back. She won't stop going on about it." So, you know, I think secretly he might have not found the idea abysmal, but I don't think he was like raring to go.
No.
Didn't even turn up to see the Madison Square Garden show when Wings were there in '76. Paul gave him tickets and he didn't even bother turning up.
No. There we are. He could have given to me, although I'd have been 10. So I couldn't have gone. Well, John, I think we'll sort of round it off there, unless you've got anything else you want to add to these thoughts.
No, this has been a good discussion. And
It has.
We didn't solve world hunger, but
we've had a good old chatter.
For people, I'm not sure, or maybe confuse people.
Hey, drop us a line. Let us know in the comments. Just so people know, I think hopefully John will be able to pop this up on his channel, and this will also be on my channel as well, and we can put all the links in and everything as well. So John, mate, it's been great chatting to you, and hopefully we'll be able to meet in person at some point in the near future.
Yeah, cheers, Andrew. It's been a good one. We'll see you later. Yeah,
take care.
Bye-bye.